Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're tackling a massive moment in American history, a time when the nation faced an unprecedented crisis and the government responded with a plan so radical it changed the country forever. It's a heavy question, right? But we're about to dive into a time when the American economy didn't just bend, it absolutely shattered. We're talking, of course, about the Great Depression and the ambitious and, very controversial plan to fix it, the New Deal. So here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at how everything fell apart in the Great Collapse. Then we'll check out President Hoover's attempts to fix things. After that, we'll see how FDR's New Deal made its grand entrance, get into all those alphabet soup agencies, and finally, wrap up with the critics and the big court battles that rocked the whole thing. All right, let's get into it. Because to really understand the New Deal, you first have to understand just how dire the situation was. So what on earth caused this complete and total economic collapse? Well, it wasn't just one thing. Think of it more like a line of dominoes, all set up to fall. For starters, you had a huge wealth gap. Most of the money was at the very top, so regular people couldn't afford to buy all the stuff factories were turning out. Then you had a stock market that was basically a casino, with people borrowing money left and right to gamble on stocks. So when the market crashed on Black Tuesday, that first domino fell, and it just set off a massive chain reaction that exposed every single crack in the system. And the human cost, wow, it was just devastating. Millions of people lost their jobs, their life savings, their homes. And this led to the rise of what became known as Hoovervilles, these makeshift towns of shacks and tents that popped up everywhere. They were a raw, visible symbol of the despair and a pretty clear sign of who the public was blaming. Okay, so with the country in an economic freefall, how did the government, under President Herbert Hoover, try to deal with it? Hoover's whole philosophy was basically hands-off. He genuinely believed that the economy would fix itself if the government just stayed out of the way. He was a big believer in rugged individualism, this idea that direct government handouts would somehow make people weak. The problem was, his policies didn't just fail. In many cases, they actually made things worse. That Holly Smoot tariff, it started a global trade war. The Reconstruction Finance Corporation, it was classic trickle-down theory. Give money to the banks and big companies, and maybe it'll get to the people. It didn't. But the real death blow to his reputation was the bonus march, when he used the U.S. Army on jobless World War I veterans. The image of that was just a complete disaster. So as you can imagine, the country was absolutely desperate for a change, for a new plan, any new plan. And in 1932, they got one, in the form of a new leader, Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the difference between these two guys couldn't have been more night and day. Hoover was all about that top-down, trickle-down approach. FDR came in and said, nope, we're flipping the script. His New Deal was all about bold experimentation, using the full power of the government to give direct help and rebuild the economy from the bottom up. FDR's whole plan was built around three simple, powerful ideas: relief, recovery, and reform. He took this plan and spoke about it directly to the American people in his famous fireside chats on the radio. For the first time in a long time, it felt like someone in Washington was actually on their side. And he did not mess around. He got his team of expert advisors, who they called the Brain Trust, and they launched the first 100 days. It was just this incredible whirlwind of action. They passed an historic number of new laws to fix the banks, create jobs, and just stop the bleeding. And all of this rapid-fire legislation created a whole new world of federal agencies. So many, in fact, that they got nicknamed the alphabet soup agencies. And I mean, just look at the scope of this stuff. The CCC put young guys to work planting trees. The TVA built massive dams to bring power to one of the poorest parts of the country. The WPA built everything from roads to schools and even paid artists to create public art. And then on the reform side, you got the SEC to police Wall Street and the FDIC to insure your money in the bank. It was huge. But, when you expand government power that fast and that far, you're going to get some pushback. And the biggest roadblock came from the Supreme Court. They started striking down some of the New Deal's cornerstone programs, arguing that FDR was overstepping the constitutional power of the federal government. And that leads us right into the intense opposition FDR was facing. And believe me, it wasn't just coming from the 9 justices on the Supreme Court. This was the central question of the day. For conservatives, the New Deal was a terrifying lurch towards socialism. But for critics on the left, it was just a Band-Aid. It wasn't doing nearly enough to truly change the system and help the poor. Everyone had a strong opinion. And this environment gave rise to some really powerful, charismatic figures. You had Father Coughlin, the radio priest, railing against FDR to millions of listeners. You had Dr. Townsend with his plan to give every senior citizen money. And then there was the biggest of them all, Senator Huey Long, with his Share Our Wealth plan, promising to make every man a king. These guys were really tapping into the public's fear and anxiety. Well, FDR's frustration with the Supreme Court finally boiled over, and he made a major political mistake. He proposed a court-packing bill, a plan to add more justices to the court, justices that would, of course, support his policies. But it totally backfired. It looked like a power grab to everyone, and his own party helped defeat it. It was a huge loss for him. But even with all the court battles and the political fights, the legacy of the New Deal is just undeniable. It's cemented in programs that are now a core part of American life. The Wagner Act gave power to labor unions. And, the biggest one of all, the Social Security Act, created a national safety net for retirement and unemployment. This was a fundamental change in the relationship between Americans and their government. So in the end, the New Deal didn't single-handedly end the Depression. The massive economic boom of World War II really did that. But it absolutely redefined American government. And it leaves us with a question that's just as relevant today as it was back then. In a crisis, how much government power is too much? Where's the right balance? The debates from the 1930s, well, they sound an awful lot like the debates we're still having right now.